Why are American cities designed so it's almost impossible not to have a car? Why were 100 railways in cities like New York, Philadelphia, and Los Angeles bought up and then deliberately destroyed? Why did the electric car get scrapped? Why were we, along with Australia, the only two countries not to sign the original Kyoto Climate Treaty? Why was an oil company lobbyist allowed to change official government reports on global warming? Why was the same PR firm employed by the tobacco industry to persuade the public that smoking is healthy, then employed by the oil industry to convince us there was still doubt about climate change? Alternative energy has been available for 50 years. Why have we barely used it? Why were solar panels taken off the White House? Because, right from the early days of the industry, the oil men and their obscene profits have had an unhealthy influence on the people running our country. And now, they are the people running our country. And they're providing the cash, too. Oil business isn't just in bed with the government, it is the government.
Human history is littered with the corpses of people who had stuff worth stealing. Animals. Water. Shiny things. Fertile land. Spices.
Nutmeg slice. Tea?
But when it came to stuff worth pinching, one continent had it all. Ivory, copper, cotton, rubber, wood, tin, gold, diamonds, and people. As cheap energy, slaves were unbeatable until a less troublesome energy source was discovered and a new era began. Human numbers increased 5 times over, and with each person wanting more and more stuff, oil became the resource worth fighting for all around the world.
Went to war in Iraq? According to former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan, it's simple, 3-letter answer, not WMD, it's OIL.
I am saddened that it's politically inconvenient to acknowledge what everyone knows, that the Iraq War is largely about oil.
You might read the ex-chairman of Shell that said over the weekend that oil could hit over $150 a barrel as world production begins to peak. Not really good news for a country whose entire economy, not to mention its entire way of life, is based on cheap oil.
Skiing in the desert. Heating the air. Lighting empty offices. Energy is so ridiculously cheap, it makes perfect economic sense to just put it away. China is the new bad guy, because they are building a new power station every 4 days. But a quarter of that energy makes stuff for us. Western companies pay Chinese workers crap wages to make crap plastic toys, then ship them to Europe and wrap them in more plastic. Punters drive to the out-of-town megastore in their gas guzzlers. Plastic toy in plastic box goes into plastic bag. 2 days later, toy is broken and back it goes to a Chinese landfill where it stays for about 50,000 years.
bottle's much better than the tap. Oh, water from the bottle's much better than the tap. Health-giving, life-enhancing, mountain spring spa.
800 times more energy wasted and 10,000 times more expensive for you. It's a tricky decision.
Lots of ideas have tried to take over the world, but there's only one winner. 3,000 adverts bombard us every day, telling us we'll be happier, more attractive and with better skin if only we buy their products. Together, they create within us an insatiable desire to buy more and more stuff. Americans have been advertised at longest, and they now each consume twice as much energy as the Europeans, 9 times more than a Chinese person, 15 times more than an Indian, and 50 times more than someone from Kenya. If all 6.5 billion people here on Earth consumed like Europeans or Japanese, we'd need 2 more planets worth of resources. If everyone consumed like Americans, Australians and Canadians, we'd need another 4. And in 2040 or so, when there's about 9 billion of us, we'll need 2 more again. Capitalism's only goal is ever-expanding growth. But ever-expanding growth on just the one not-expanding planet is impossible. The current economic system is disastrous, not just for the planet, but for most people too. 400 years of capitalism has allowed the richest 1% to take 40% for themselves, leaving just 1% for the poorest half. But anyone wanting to live differently is thwarted at every turn. With profit the only measuring stick, destroying the planet is written into the system, and runaway climate change is a not very surprising result.
Governments will only go as far as the population demands, and that means mass protest on an unprecedented scale. Direct action like this is essential if you're going to turn an issue round in a short period of time. We've found that many, many times in the past, from the suffragettes onwards. The very fact that the crisis is taking place within our generation, it's happening right now, means that we are tremendously powerful people. So this position of despair and I can't do anything and there's no point is completely illogical. It's exactly the opposite.
Climate scientists can estimate how much of the remaining fossil fuels we can safely burn. This amount is called the global cap. Under this proposal, the world's governments would make a binding international agreement detailing how to distribute the global cap. The earlier the start date, the greater the chance of not triggering runaway climate change. The total global emissions for the first year, say 2012, will be set at their current level. Every year following, they'd shrink until, by about 2065, they're almost zero. Initially, each country would be allocated an emissions quota according to how much they currently consume. But this would change over time. America would slash its emissions 90% from its current over-consuming position. Europe too would decrease massively, as would China. But India and Africa would increase until, by about 2025, each human being on the planet would have equal rights to the Earth's resources. Equity is the only option morally, and also practically, as developing countries won't sign up to anything less. The total emissions would then keep decreasing every year, until by 2065 we'll have weaned ourselves off fossil fuels and prevented the worst impacts of climate change. As to how each country divvies up its share to its citizens, there are various options on the table, the most promising of which is individual carbon rationing.
And it is global warming. For the first time, scientists confirm the link between climate change and our awful weather.
Emergency services scramble to Bedford's swollen. As the floodwaters finally worked their way along the Great Ouse, other parts of Bedfordshire didn't escape either.
We've lived up here for over 40 years, and we've never, ever had anything like this.
At least 80,000 fatalities in Burma today after Cyclone Nergis.
Drought emergency across Western Europe with drinking water strictly rationed in Holland, France.
Forest fires which are still sweeping across Spain.
£30 billion, a price worth paying for motorists' right to drive, said Lord Clarkson of Silver.
Good news for the UK wine industry, especially...
The latest is that New Orleans will not be rebuilt a third time. Louisiana
less than the total destruction of India's dams would end Pakistan's drinking water crisis.
As US President Chelsea Clinton refuses Africa's demand.
Sales of air conditioning units in India.
Thousands as San Francisco's extraordinary heat wave continues into Los Angeles.
Now we're seeing extreme weather events somewhere on the planet every single day. Estimated 35 million Chinese refugees.
Skiing in the Alps is over.
The new Channel 4 documentary asks, is global warming really happening, or are natural...
It's 61 degrees centigrade, the highest land temperature.
More than 100 million people are homeless tonight as
massive
Bangladesh...
methane emissions from Siberia.
The last Indonesian tree fell, but biofuel prices are...
The European Union today permanently closed all of its borders.
And roadside verges must be reserved for food production.
London is underwater again as last night's 30-foot storm surge overcame the Thames barrier.
New Zealand has also now closed its borders, leaving 22 million Australians. Reports are coming in that the North Sea is boiling.
100 million refugees from Middle East and continental Europe are all heading north.
Species are now extinct, scientists estimate, and ecosystems are collapsing across the planet.
We have passed 2 degrees. We cannot now stop runaway climate change.
There are simply too many people to feed on Ireland's remaining farmland.
Suicide rates increasing 800%. The Amazon rainforest is still burning.
And anyone who cannot bear to eat their own cats and dogs.
Entering the 8th world food crisis. With
world temperatures today passing 4 degrees.
Pakistan has launched retaliatory nuclear strike onto Delhi.
a war of biblical ferocity across the entire continent.
We wouldn't be the first life form to wipe itself out. But what would be unique about us is that we did it knowingly.